Hello viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel. Get ready for heart-touching stories. Don't forget to subscribe and let's begin.
The text came at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. Maya was still in her work clothes, sitting cross-legged on her apartment floor, eating leftover rice straight from the container she'd heated up 20 minutes ago and forgotten about. Her phone lit up on the carpet beside her, and without thinking, the way you reach for things that have burned you 100 times before, she picked it up. "Don't contact us again. Your father and I have made our decision. We wish you well," she read it 3 times. Then she set the phone face down on the carpet, picked up her fork and took a bite of cold rice. That was how she knew she had finally changed. Because 2 years ago that text would have shattered her. She would have called back immediately, crying, apologizing for things she hadn't done, begging for an explanation she would never receive. She would have driven to their house at midnight, knocked on the door like a child locked out in a storm. She would have made it her mission, her emergency, her entire world to fix whatever she had, according to them, broken. But that night she just sat there. She finished her rice. She washed her fork. She brushed her teeth, changed into an oversized t-shirt, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling for a long time. She let herself feel the sadness, really feel it, the way her therapist had taught her. Not the frantic, scrambling sadness that needed to be fixed immediately, but the quiet, deep sadness of someone who has finally accepted that a door they've been knocking on for 31 years was never going to open the way they needed it to. She cried a little. Not ugly crying, just tears sliding sideways into her pillow. Then she slept. The history between Maya and her mother, Diane, was the kind that's hard to explain to people who grew up in gentle houses with soft voices and Saturday morning pancakes. Not because it was dramatic. There were no bruises, no screaming matches that the neighbors called the police over, nothing that would make a clean villain out of anyone. It was subtler than that, quieter, the kind of damage that accumulates the way water damage does, invisible until one day the ceiling caves. Diane was a woman who loved her children the way a fist loves what it holds, tightly, possessively, with no distinction between love and control. Maya's older brother Daniel had figured out early how to maneuver inside that grip. He agreed with everything. He called every Sunday. He married a woman Diane approved of and moved 15 minutes away and let his mother babysit 3 times a week and attended every family dinner without complaint. He had in the process slowly disappeared as a person, but he was loved. He was the good one. Maya had never been the good one, not because she was rebellious exactly. She just kept insisting with maddening persistence on being herself. She studied literature instead of business. She moved to a city 4 hours away. She dated someone Diane hated for 3 years, and when it ended on Maya's terms, not because Diane had prayed it into failure. She had opinions about things. She said no sometimes. She went to therapy and started using phrases like, "That doesn't work for me and I need you to speak to me differently." And Diane had received each of these phrases like a personal attack. The final rupture, if there was a single one, and there rarely is in families like this, had started 6 weeks before the text. Maya had missed Easter dinner, not maliciously. She'd had a fever of 102. She'd called the morning of apologetic, genuinely unwell. Diane had gone quiet on the phone in that particular way she had, the silence that was its own kind of weather system, and said, "Fine, feel better." 2 words that meant the opposite of what they said. In the weeks that followed, the calls became shorter, colder. Her father, Raymond, a gentle man who had spent 40 years choosing peace over truth, stopped calling entirely, which meant Diane had told him to. Then came a Sunday call where Diane brought up, for what felt like the 100th time, that Maya's apartment was too small, her job was unstable. She was getting older, and hadn't she thought about moving back home? And Maya had said calmly, she thought carefully, "Mom, I've told you before that I'm happy with my life. I need you to trust that." And Diane had said, "You've always been selfish." And Maya, for the first time in 31 years, had said, "I'm going to hang up now." She had hung up. 6 days later, "Don't contact us again." The first week of silence was the strangest. Maya had expected to feel unmoored. Instead, she felt something she could only describe as spacious. Like a room she'd been cramped in had suddenly gained square footage. She went to work. She called her best friend Priya, who had watched the Myra and Diane situation unfold for a decade and who said with characteristic bluntness, "Good, now let's see if you can actually hold it." She held it. She did not text her mother to check if she was okay. She did not ask Daniel to mediate, Daniel, who would inevitably report everything back to Diane and frame Maya as the aggressor. She did not compose long explanatory emails in her notes app at 2 in the morning. She went to therapy, where she and her therapist talked about the grief of estrangement, which is a specific kind of grief because the person you're mourning is still alive and has chosen, in some sense, to be dead to you. "Hardest part," Maya told her therapist, "is that I don't even know if I want it to be fixed. I think I've wanted it to be fixed my whole life. And now I'm not sure I'd recognize a fixed version of us if I saw it." Her therapist nodded. "That's actually a sign of health," she said. "You're not chasing something just because it's familiar." Maya held on to that. On day 9, she started sleeping better than she had in years. The call came on a Thursday morning, 48 hours after the text. Actually, the calls, plural. Maya was in the middle of a work meeting when her phone, face down on her desk, began vibrating. She ignored it. It stopped, then it started again. She glanced at the screen. "Mom." She declined it and turned her phone over. By the time her meeting ended 45 minutes later, she had 58 missed calls. 58. She stood in the hallway outside the conference room and scrolled through the log. They had come in waves, 3 in a row, then a pause, then 5 more, then a long gap, then a frantic cluster of 11. The timestamps told a story. Her mother had started calling at 9:15 in the morning and hadn't stopped until nearly noon. There were also 4 voicemails and a string of texts that began with Maya please pick up and escalated in a direction Maya couldn't quite read. Urgency, yes, but also something that felt different from the usual urgency, which was always about Diane's feelings. This felt like something else. She listened to the first voicemail. Maya, it's Mom, please call me back. It's important. Dunn's voice was tight, controlled, the voice she used when she was trying very hard not to fall apart. Second voicemail, Maya please, I know things have been, I need to talk to you, please call me. Third voicemail, and here was where the voice cracked. Your father is in the hospital, he had a chest pains this morning. I'm at St. Cuthbert's, please, I need you. Mo was in her car in 11 minutes. This is the part of the story that people sometimes use to make a point about forgiveness, about how emergencies dissolve estrangements, about how blood is thicker than everything. But it wasn't like that for Maya, or rather, it wasn't only like that. It wasn't that the text became irrelevant. It wasn't that the 58 calls erased the don't contact us again, or the you've always been selfish, or the 31 years of a love that squeezed too hard and called it care. It was that her father was a separate person. Drummond, who had never been cruel to her, who had failed her mostly through his softness, through his lifelong inability to stand between his wife and his daughter and say enough. Drummond, who used to make her grilled cheese when she was sick. Drummond, who had slow danced with her at her cousin's wedding to a song neither of them knew and laughed about it all night. Drummond, who was lying in a hospital somewhere with something wrong with his heart. She drove to him because she loved him, not because the rules had changed, not because she had forgiven everything, not because her mother's 58 calls had demonstrated sufficient need. She drove because she had her own reasons, her own relationship, her own love that existed independently of her mother's grip on it. That distinction felt important. It felt like the difference between being pulled back in and choosing with open eyes to walk through a door. The hospital waiting room was beige and overlit, the way all hospital waiting rooms are, as if harsh fluorescence is part of the treatment. Diane was sitting in a plastic chair in the corner, still in the clothes she'd slept in, yoga pants, a sweatshirt with a local high school logo on it, her hair unbrushed. She looked, for the first time in Maya's memory, small. When she saw Maya come through the door, something crossed her face that Maya had never seen there before. It wasn't exactly relief. It was more like recognition, the kind that arrives too late, that has to reckon with its own delay. Ya came, Diane said. Of course I came, Maya said. How is huh? She sat down beside her mother, not close enough to touch, but close. Diane told her what had happened. Drummond had complained of chest pains over breakfast. She called 911, the paramedics had come, they were running tests now, the doctor had mentioned the words minor cardiac event and said it wasn't the worst outcome but that it was a warning and that there would be changes. Diet, stress, medication. Drummond would likely be fine. He was already stable, Maya exhaled. They sat in silence for a while after that. Diane had her hands folded in her lap and was staring at a television on the wall that was playing a morning talk show with the sound off. Maya watched the closed captions scroll. Some celebrity was talking about a diet. Fuftuat calls Mom, Maya said finally. Diane didn't say anything. Ufta, you told me not to contact you. No, I'm not saying it as an accusation, I'm just saying it. Diane turned to look at her daughter, her eyes were red. She looked exhausted in a way that wasn't just about the morning. She looked like a woman who was tired from a much longer effort. I panicked, she said. I didn't know who else to call. You could have called Daniel. A pause. I called you first. Let that sit there. What? She asked. Diane looked back at the television. The celebrity was laughing now about something. Because you're the one who always comes when it matters, she said quietly. I've always known that, even when she stopped, started again. Even when I made it hard for you to. Thus was, in 31 years, perhaps the closest Diane had come to saying something honest about what she had done. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't self-aware enough to be an apology, but it was something, a tiny crack in a wall that had always been completely sealed. Maya didn't rush to fill it with forgiveness or warmth, she just let the crack exist. I'm glad Dad is okay, she said. Ma too. I'm going to stay until we can see him. Ka. Then we need to talk, not today but soon. Diane nodded slowly. Okay, she said again. Drummond came home 4 days later with a prescription, a dietary pamphlet and instructions to reduce stress. He called Maya from the hospital room before he was discharged, and their conversation was the kind they almost never had, direct, tender, unguarded. He said he was sorry he hadn't done more over the years. He didn't specify what more meant. He didn't need to. Maya said she loved him. He said he loved her too. The conversation with Diane happened 2 weeks later over the phone. Maya had prepared for it, not with a list of grievances but with a single, clear intention. She was not going to manage her mother's emotions. She was not going to soften the truth to keep the peace. She was not going to apologize for existing in the shape she existed in. She told her mother that she loved her. She also told her that the way their relationship had functioned was not sustainable. That she needed Diane to work with her on something different, to actually work, in the therapeutic sense, not just promise to be nicer and return to old patterns within a month. She said she was open to building something real if Diane was willing. And she said as clearly and kindly as she could, that if Diane wasn't willing, then Maya would grieve that and find a way to live with it. But she would no longer spend her life trying to earn a love that came with that many conditions. Diane cried. She said things that were defensive. She said things that were sad. She said she didn't fully understand, but she would try. Maya said that was enough for now. There's a version of this story that ends with a complete reconciliation. Sunday dinners restored, the mother transformed, the daughter welcomed home. That's the version people want. It's clean. It has a bow on it. The real version is messier and, Maya would say, more valuable. Dylan made an appointment with a therapist, something Maya had suggested for 15 years. She went twice, then stopped, then started again. Progress was not linear. There were phone calls that slid back into old patterns. There were moments when Dylan said something careless and Maya had to remind herself that she was not responsible for managing the fallout, but there were also new things. Moments that hadn't existed before the text, before the 58 calls, before Maya held the line long enough for something to shift. Dylan asking one evening, "How are you actually doing?" And waiting for the real answer. Deanne saying once, only once, but still, "I think I was hard on you in ways I didn't realize." Small things, imperfect things, Maya accepted them as exactly what they were, not proof that everything was healed, but evidence that healing was possible. That was enough to keep the door open, not flung wide, not the way it might have been if she'd run back the first time she was asked, but open a careful amount, enough for light to come through. She still lived 4 hours away. She still went to therapy every other week. She still had boundaries that her mother didn't love. And she still sometimes lay awake and felt the specific grief of having a mother who would never be the mother she had needed. But she had learned something in those 48 hours of silence between the text and the calls, something she hadn't known she needed to learn. She had learned that she could survive her mother's rejection. That her life, her sense of self, her capacity for joy did not depend on Diane's approval. That the most loving thing she had ever done for the relationship was refuse, finally and firmly, to keep it alive on terms that were killing her. The silence had been the making of her. The 58 calls had just been the proof. On the first anniversary of that Tuesday night, Maya sat in her apartment, a bigger one now in the same city, and ate dinner at an actual table with an actual candle lit. Priya was there and a few other friends who had become the chosen family that fills the space when the given one falls short. Someone had brought wine. Someone else had brought a cake for no reason at all. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from her mother, a photo of a garden she'd started planting. Tomatoes, it turned out. Raymond's suggestion. Maya looked at the photo for a moment, then showed it to Priya. "Baby steps," Priya said. Asterisk baby steps, Maya agreed. Asterisk, and then the candle flickered and someone laughed at something and the evening went on.